Oh, okay, here we go. Hi, Mike. So it's really wonderful to see you again after
Yeah.
a a long time in which sort of like nothing, but also a lot happened, right?
Well, I mean, it's strange to see you. It feels like I just saw you.
Yeah,
Uh, you know, it, although it's been, I guess, over a year since we were in
yeah,
this,
like 14 months or so, right?
and it does feel like simultaneously it went by in a flash, and also it's a lifetime.
Yeah,
It's a bit, time.
exactly.
It's a very strange construct.
So how are you dealing with the situation?
um, well, right after, we we left the U.S. tour midway through, and just as every other touring musician was just like flying home right around March 12th, March 13th.
Hmm.
That was the beginning of the new now, and so yeah, it was just a couple of weeks of sort of disbelief and like what part of you wants to believe that, well, this is just going to blow over, and of course it doesn't.
Hmm.
So looking back on my recent history of my career and everything, I realized, like touring was probably around 90% of my income every year,
Hmm.
and uh, and I had to figure something out. So the situation was such that it we did a GoFundMe in order to get a home studio going, because I didn't have any real decent recording facilities at home. The last time I had the ability to actually like do multi-track recording at home had been like 8-9 years before, when I was
Hmm. Hmm.
a scam bot at home, and then I disassembled that rig and never replaced it. So it was time to get a new rig going, and with nothing, there were no promises that somehow I was going to be able to make a go of it. But it's actually turned out okay. That since I've been able to record stuff at home, there's been a fairly consistent, reliable stream of projects coming through that has allowed me to keep going. That in tandem with the Patreon account, which I started in June,
Hmm.
tremendously fun, and I recommend highly to any musician who has like an archive of stuff to share. Patreon is a nice place to do it, and that has turned into a real blessing. The combination of the Patreon plus just uh, projects coming through to work on. It's I when I put the rig together, the recording rig, I kind of thought, well, at least I'll be able to work on my next album.
Hmm.
But I've been able to do pretty much everything but that,
Hmm.
and but that's a good problem to have, that there's so much work to be done that it keeps me from doing this, at least historically non-paying thing.
Yeah, I hear you. And
That's sort of the thing of that I put most of my heart in, and by far earns the least amount of money. Um, but you got to do what you got to do. But anyway, I've been very grateful to be busy.
hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I've also had this experience that somehow you would expect as a musician to really to get creative when you have time and to and I sort of had to force myself to do a live stream where I improvised, and then I created something new. But just like the freedom of writing, somehow it I don't know why. I think it's like this danger that's like over my head like a sword, that's like saying, okay, you gotta have an income in order to feed your family, and like being creative, interestingly enough, hasn't been a big part of that. I mean, I have been creative, had to be creative to make money in other ways, right? But yeah, I have to say it is really weighing on me now, and I've actually set up a recording session with a few friends for early March, just to, that I'm investing in, just to kind of like get back into doing something creative.
Good. I'm glad. Yeah, it certainly, having this edge of you are required to be creative in order to survive that's like placing a demand on creativity that can definitely affect the dynamic. In my case, when I get like an idea for something that I want to record for my album, I just have to like sketch it out very quickly. So I have a lot of sketches in progress, and prior to all this beginning, I thought that the album was pretty much done.
Mm-hmm.
But then once I started like investigating the amount of material that I have and the kind of album that I wanted to make, which is turning out to be kind of not an anthology, but it's a combination of very new music plus the best of the unreleased stuff that I have collected over the last 20 years or so.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to keep I wanted to continue recording new stuff. Once I realized, okay, this album, at least in the physical realm of CDs, it's definitely going to be a double CD thing. So now I have additional real estate that I can work with, and I really the first half of it is all discrete songs, 10 songs, which are 2/3 of them are fairly accessible,
Mm-hmm.
and the second half of the album is going to be a suite of material that is sort of sewn together from a lot of source material that I've recorded with a lot of different musicians, plus newly recorded stuff that I'm doing at home. And the stuff that I'm recording at home is kind of like the journal of the last year in pandemic. So I think the second half of the album is going to be more of like a study of my mindset under these conditions.
That is interesting, because I wouldn't even know that music that would describe that state, how that would be. And I think like it will be a subconscious thing for me that it will show up in the music, but I couldn't and wouldn't approach that consciously at all. And I don't think you did that intuitively as well, I guess. Or
It's I mean, it's very difficult. Certainly, since some of my stuff has lyrics as well. There's no way to do justice to it without it being a cliche with the lyrical content, which I want to avoid. So in terms of this idea of it being just a reflection of this time we're all in, it is an intuitive thing, and it's not a thing where it's like it's inevitable. Once I get in here. And I start making music, everything is impacted by the reality of the situation. The idea that we're locked down here. It's like I'm still I'm and my wife, we're both real serious about lockdown conditions. We haven't seen a compelling reason not to remain cautious. So we're just here at home all the time. So I've never spent so much time at home. So that leads to an inevitable, feel that takes over, and I think that when the album is done, whether I want it to or not, it's going to end up being like a picture of this time and this process.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So for the people that probably don't know, we were on the tour together in November and December 2019, right? It was like 5.5 weeks or something that we kind of spent together.
Yeah,
And,
I got to rehearsal late because my kid was getting married. So I showed up to rehearsal like 3 or 4 days after the rest of you did.
Yeah.
And that was daunting because you all had your stuff together real well, and I was like trying to find my way with new music, new band, new gear. Just everything was new. It was the first time I'd ever played live with Devin, even after having spent so much time making the album. It was disorienting in a way to arrive in the UK after this long flight, seeing my kid get married, and then just suddenly plunging into this completely new situation. We ended up the most beautiful band and the most beautiful shows and the most wonderful touring experience. I have such an immensely fond recollection of that tour, and I'm glad that the live album and video exists of the Roundhouse show. But it's hard to believe that that's already 14 months ago. It really does kind of feel like.
But you know, when you arrived at the and joined us at the rehearsals, that's when everything came together. Obviously, yeah, yeah. One question related to that, really, like kind of like a nerdy question. But so you started using Devon's open C tuning, I guess, before the tour. So probably you already used it on the album, or
Well, I didn't do that much playing on the album. A little bit of guitar playing, which it was always very part specific. So it wasn't like I had to learn an entire song. It might be just like a little moment, like some weird little Zappa-esque melody that Devon wanted to play, and it was just easier for me to do it than for him to figure it out. And for some of that kind of stuff, I actually used standard tuning.
Mm-hmm.
So my first real time spent with Dev's open C tuning was in the the rehearsal process at home, preparing for the tour, and and it was definitely a new territory for me. Just having to rewire the way your mind wants to go when it puts its hand on a guitar neck. If you want to go from this interval to that interval, your program didn't know. Well, let's just go from there to there. Now it's going to be going from there to there, or from there to there, or everything has changed.
Yeah, it was fascinating.
And then it's like, okay, got to play a solo on Heaven's End, and that song is in B flat, but it's still the strings are still the same intervals in relation to one another. So that's an exciting thing. Okay, now not only do I have to feel comfortable in this terrain, but I also have to feel confident enough to improvise in that terrain. And that was a real challenge. And I know several shows where I played absolute trash in an attempt to improvise in that tuning. So you just have to like find a maybe 4 or 5 reliable things that you can do that are home based,
Mm-hmm.
and start trying to string them together in increasingly more creative ways. And by the end of the tour, I started to feel a bit more fluent in this tuning. Definitely not like Devon levels of fluency where he can improvise without any hesitation. In fact, I would imagine it would be very strange for Devon to improvise in standard tuning at this point with all the time he spent with the open C tune.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, by the end of the tour, I started to feel like, hey, I'm actually starting to get somewhere here. But after 25 shows or whatever.
Yeah, it's interesting when you change tunings, the absolute pitch of each string and obvious position on the neck becomes very prominent again in the way that you think, right? It's less of a relational playing. It's more absolute, like, okay, I go to that note, I go to a D, I go to a C because I know that there's a D there, and then I can find my way around like that D. I can play an F, and I can also play a B, right? And
yeah, it was very. I couldn't ever really think about note names.
Mm-hmm.
That was too disorienting for me. So it's all just about becoming comfortable with intervals, and and you don't technically need to know what this note is to know that 3 frets up is a minor third up. It's just about wherever I am right now in the world. This is the center of it all, and everything moves around it, and it's becoming taking those baby steps away from the root and becoming more comfortable. If I step that way, I know what happens. If I step that way, I know what happens, and it takes a while to get there. But the thing that is nice about that tuning is the there's a continuity it's just 1-5, 1-5, 1-3. So if you know how to play on these two strings fluently, then you'll know how to play on the next two strings because it's the same notes an octave up. And once you sort of make your peace with that, then it becomes it forces you to play differently. Certainly, in the standard tuning, I've definitely played more chromatically and more experimentally. And in the open tuning, I'm not confident enough to be particularly experimental. But I did learn how to play a rock and roll guitar solo eventually. It's about staying on one string. It's like I know that note, and I know if I don't leave this string, I know exactly what's going on.
It was fascinating that you didn't look like you were playing a new tuning, really. Like what I found so wonderful about your stage presence was like it was as if there was a switch in you. Like you went on stage, you flipped the switch, and there's Keneally the performer, and was really wonderful. I have to say, just the energy you have, and and also I was surprised how hard you play. Like
Oh, I have
that.
terrible technique as a guitar, shit out of the guitar. My whole life it's a good thing I'm getting older and weaker because it means I'll have no choice but to apply less strength but yeah, it's because I never had any guitar lessons, and I just like I love playing the guitar so much that I just get overexcited about it. So I end up applying a lot of force more than I need to, but I've just had to find a way to work with it.
That's one way of looking at it. That's one way of looking at it, but maybe it also gives you a very specific sound and energy. So I think I've only experienced the way that you play as an advantage for you.
It's nice. Thank you. Well, I mean, it's me, it's what I do. And even when I think I'm being lyrical and gentle, it often just like comes across as forceful. Like when earlier in 2019 when we did the Bizarre World of Frank Zappa tour, we played in London and had Dave Gregory from XTC came out and Chris Hughes was there and Steven Wilson came out to the show. And after the show, he was like, he really enjoyed the show. It was clear to see that he enjoyed the show. And then he said, what I love about your playing, it's so violent. It's like, oh man, it's not what I'm thinking. I'm not in a violent mindset. I'm not like up there trying to be Johnny Rotten or anything. I'm really trying to make beautiful music, but it just part of it is just an abundance of enthusiasm. Like you say that a switch goes on when I get on stage, and I think it does, and it just really has to do with how much I love it. It's as I love performing so much that it kind of overtakes me, and I also feel like I transcend myself in some ways. Like when I'm off stage, I'm all too aware of me and my body and my physical reality and all that. When I get on stage, all of that seems to fade away, and I try to just become a beam of pure matter that's offering itself to the moment and creative impulse. And the fact that we were all wearing in-ear monitors and that we weren't nobody had any amps on stage, so the only sounds that are being generated acoustically are drums and voices, and everything else is electronic impulses being fed through wires. It means that the sound was so controllable, and I had myself hard left and I had Devin hard right, and a lot of my parts were just playing the exact same thing as him, which allowed him a certain amount of comfort level if he took his hand away from the instrument to point at the audience or whatever, that the part wouldn't stop. And and also he had like conversations with me about how this is I play in Death Clock and stuff, but I'm not a metal musician. But there are some aspects to the textures of Devin's music which are metallic in nature, and he's like, yeah, to him anyway, a big, an important texture in effective, correct sounding metal music is two guitars playing the exact same thing. That's really what he wants. And it was very satisfying. Well, first of all, I love the songs. I think the songs are so great. So being able to phrase my parts in the idea is just like trying to just slip into that thing of perfect unison, so that when Devin and I are playing the same thing at the same time, it really does have a strength and a power. And then just like feeding into my mix, you and the voices and the bass and the drums and Diego and all of the sounds that he's triggering. It was musically incredibly satisfying, and I resisted in-ear monitors for years and years and years. I didn't want to disconnect myself from the energy in the room. This was what I was afraid was going to happen. But once I finally got over myself, and I had to start using in-ears for the Frank Zappa tour, because we were playing along with recordings of Frank. Frank was playing guitar solos that we had to accompany, and the whole show is on a grid, so we had to hear a click in order to stay aligned with all the visuals and everything. So, and I fell in love with in-ears on the Zappa tour, and then I fell in love with them even more on the Devin tour, because all of that music was being made in real time. It's unusually for Devin. There were no tracks. We weren't playing to a click. We were actually just playing, and it was just such a blast. It's so much fun.
Yeah, I have to say it was sort of like ear-opening to me as well, because one of the main reasons why I started, or we with Stickman started using in-ear monitoring, was that we could have a click if we needed to. Like Pat would throw in a click sometimes, and but then on the Devin tour, not to have that at all, but to have that closeness of the mix in your ears, like that was something really special. And I think it's something that has maybe become sort of like a little bit of lost art, just to play without a click, but you use the modern technology of in-ear monitoring. And in a way, and this is where I had this idea of this throwback to like Frank Zappa tours in the late 70s. The vibe of people actually playing together for real, and and like when I wasn't around back then. You weren't around in the late 70s, or not on stages, I don't think. But when people started having personal monitor mixers, like you had your own mixer to make your own monitor mix, that was kind of like state-of-the-art technology back then. So one question that came up to mind. So in my monitor in-ear mix, the band was incredibly tight. It was really incredibly tight. However, I would be interesting to hear how tight we really were. And I mean, I know that Devin mixed the show and it sounds incredibly tight, and I'm just wondering, like, did he have to do anything, or?
You're in the moment when you're actually doing the show. And I experienced the same thing. I thought that, and I guarantee you, we were tight. It's like, and the in-ears were a huge part of that. The fact that there is no, there is that moment of reflection that it takes for that bass note over there to make it over to your side of the stage, and wedge mixes are always difficult to really dial in, and there's always seems to be something that you can't quite hear properly to the wedge, for some frequency reason. It's gonna cause feedback or whatever. So with the in-ears, you can really customize. You can really dial it in, and yeah, we were tight. There's no doubt about it. And I think that the in-ears increased the tightness factor. However, this is Devin we're talking about, and he definitely likes things to be incredibly tight, even given that sort of the brief for the tour was, this is we're on a tightrope without a net, and he's not using tracks, he's not using a click. This is it was an unusually spontaneous tour for him, but after the fact, once he got home with the recordings, you know, I guarantee you he heard all the sorts of that he got repaired in one way or another. But when you listen to that recording, or you watch that show, the Order of Magnitude show, it's definitely live. You know, it's a live feel, and it's the same. It's kind of similar to what you were saying about those Zappa tours, where it was just seeing humans playing this, you know, mind-blowing stuff. I think that the Devon tour had a similar energy, but there was also an incredible human energy to it, just like the relationships between everyone in the band, and you know, I just feel like the relationship between the band and the audience was every night was really special and really warm. I was grateful for it every night. The love that people have for Devon is incredibly clear when you go to when you perform those shows and you look down in the audience. I get the feeling that people, you know, they're admiring of Devon, they're protective of Devon, because, you know, Devon wears his heart on his sleeve all the time. If something's going weird during the show, he'll talk about it for 5 minutes between songs, you know. And for someone who's so outlandishly talented, he's, you know, always seems to have like a bit of a seed of self-doubt, you know, when he's performing, and he's, you know, he's always taking the piss out of himself. He's always you know, tearing down the fourth wall and telling people exactly how he's feeling at that moment. So it's this weird combination of an extremely well rehearsed, well prepared, very plotted out show, and then this other feeling that it could all just go spinning off the rails at any moment, because Devon is sharing every bit of himself, every molecule of himself, and if something is not going right, he doesn't hide the fact. So it's powerful. It all adds up, I think, to a powerful night of entertainment at the theater.
Yeah, for me, the fact that the audience seemed to primarily be there because of the emotional relationship with the music, which was kind of, I have to say, new to me. Like the audiences I usually play to, they also have some sort of other motivations, which I don't know, like it's like the innovation they want to hear, or, you know, there's something else. But here with Devon's audiences, especially, I remember the show in Helsinki, which was sort of, for me, almost an out-of-body experience, because it felt to me as if I was in the audience during the show, and like, but I could see people like be almost like being so emotional, almost in tears throughout the whole of the show, and that was really something that was completely new to me, and it was energizing in a very interesting way. It was not pushing me, but it was relaxing me, and it was giving me some. I don't even have words for that, I have to admit.
But it was most powerful in Helsinki for you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you remember that show at all?
My brain doesn't work that way, where I attach specific events to specific towns. I play with Brian Beller in my band. Remembers every show we've ever done. He remembers the backstage catering. You know, remembers exactly. I don't understand how a brain can work that way. Mine definitely doesn't. You know, once I have completed a show, it's like if I don't call home and tell Sarah right away what happened that day, I won't remember the next day what happened. I'm just, you know, I'm like a baby boy in the woods. It's just my eyes wide open. Oh, what's today like? I kind of let go of yesterday as soon as it's done, so I have a hard time remembering. But, you know, when you mentioned Helsinki, I did like get a feeling of, yeah, I think I remember that being special. Although I don't remember what happened, but can you like describe? I guess it was just the energy between the audience and the band at that show.
Yeah, it really was like tears in people's eyes in the first few rows from the very first second that we started playing.
I noticed that at a number of shows, that very emotional members. I just think Devon's fans really care about him. They want him to be well, and I think that's you know, there's a through line with a lot of performers. especially performers who just share a lot of themselves. I think an audience likes to is more inclined to offer that kind of love and support if the artist shows that they are being honest with them. And you'd be real hard pressed to think of a more honest artist than Devin. He puts it all out there and he doesn't hide anything practically. So it's an intense thing to be a part of. It certainly was on that tour.
So Mike, when you look back on your career, has there been like any phase where you were not in love with music?
I can't even know. I don't think I've ever gone through that. I always knew that music had my back. That doesn't necessarily mean that I haven't occasionally been a part of a project that I was not as enthusiastic about. But that, for professional reasons, I gave it my all. But it was, I never blamed music for that. Music is just remains one of the most, for me, like reliable and supportive forces in my life. It's every time I'm surprised every time I sit down here and start working on a recording, whether it's for somebody else's project or my own. Just there's always something to be learned, and it's always sometimes it can be musical, or it can be just sonic. On the Devon tour, I noticed I got into taking the guitar pick and changing its relationship to the string, go more or less perpendicular, and because you're hearing everything in your in-ears, I would just trip out on how it would affect the sound of everything, at least in my ears, because I was up loud. If twisting the pick that way gave the timbre of my instrument a completely different character, and then as a result of that, it would interact differently with Devon's guitar, and then the sound of those two guitars together would then have a different relationship to your guitar and all the other instruments. And I would just trip out, and even just say, wow, if I do like this, all of a sudden the guitar sounds like a clarinet section. And then if I go like that, it's more like cellos. These are the type of things where even after all these years I've been doing music, there's still the capacity to surprise and delight me. And that was the thing that, after all those years of resisting in-ears, I would never have an experience that specific and microcosmic on stage if it weren't for the in-ears, because you can't really assess and appreciate things that subtle, when it's raging out at you through a wedge on the ground. And I asked myself in those moments the same thing that you would ask yourself, that you were wondering about, how tight were we? We sound incredibly tight in the in-ears. Is it coming across that way? My feeling about that is that yes, we definitely were like a really tight, well-drilled unit, and it was getting across. But as far as these very subtle timbre things, I'm thinking as I'm going, man, it's just as I make the tiniest little infinitesimal adjustment, it changes the quality of my sound so much, which then has, a knock-on effect with the overall sound. How much of that is getting out to the audience? And I would always just land at, okay, where's the heaviest sound? Because we just want these songs to just sound incredibly powerful and have a strong foundation, and this, even if the music is really fast and intense and shifting all over the place, you want every moment unto itself to have as much authority and power as possible. So I noticed a couple of times that when I would make these tiny pick adjustments and look out at the audience, it goddamn had an effect on the way the audience was receiving the music. I would to me, it's I would do that little adjustment, it would sound heavier to me, and I would see a more passionate response from people in the audience at that moment. So when you think about that, when details that minute can have such an impact. It's just like science or any other, you know, endless discipline. Music has so much; it contains so much, and I can't imagine myself ever getting tired of it. That'll be really sad if it ever happens, because it's pretty much the only thing I can do. I'm useless as a specimen without that. Uh,
Yeah,
yeah.
so the details, I think, really always have the biggest impact. And I first became super aware of that once I started building my own guitars.
Sure.
And I noticed that like anybody can buy, or let's just talk about regular electric guitars, okay? It's like anybody can build a guitar like that. And I mean, what is the difference between a Squier Strat and a Fender Strat, right? You could say, oh, it's exactly the same. But then, like you see, okay, the things that you don't really see when you're standing like 3 feet away from it, you get closer, then you see differences, right? You start seeing differences, and then somebody can say, okay, different materials, but then you pick it up and you touch it, and oh, it feels different, right? And then you start like, it sounds different. So, but you're getting like the details, or the it gets smaller and smaller, but the more you zoom into the differences, the more impact they have on what comes out of the instrument, I find. And
Yeah, it's those very, very, tiny fractal type details where it just seems like that's how you learn, right? It's a constant educational process, where you might, when you're a kid and you pick up a guitar, and that's a beautiful, blissful period, because it's just, you got a guitar, a cable, and an amp, and you go, and you feel like, okay, I've just reinvented the world here. But then the more you do it, if you are a person who values learning in your life, which I think is the meaning of life, is to learn. I think that it's yeah, the more you drill down into those details, and it doesn't have to be like a tech-oriented thing, because I'm not a tech-oriented person. I could never do what you do. I could never design, and there's so much about the mechanics of instruments that are a real mystery to me, and I think I've preferred keeping that kind of idiot savant relationship to this stuff. But for me, just like putting in ears and getting much more involved in the way it sounds when a band truly phrases together, and appreciating the impact that has on the music. I feel like it kind of, another example, I'm not like a trained vocalist. I'm a real intuitive vocalist, and with my own music, I would always just like, when I'm making records in the studio, I work on the vocals. I want them to sound nice. I want them to sound in tune and stuff. But in the 90s, when I would play with Beer for Dolphins, it was almost more like a punk approach, where, I'm playing these really hard guitar parts and I'm singing at the same time. I thought it was okay enough to be able to do anything. It's like, if I'm playing and singing, the actual quality of the vocal performance was not as much of a concern to me as just the impact of the overall performance. And I thought just the fact that I was standing up there doing all that stuff was sufficient. But after a couple of decades of singing my own songs on stage, and not enjoying whenever I would hear the recordings back, it's like it's one thing to be in the moment, but especially now with the internet and YouTube, it's like moments are no longer fleeting. Moments are captured like a wasp in aspic, and and displayed as, placed in a gallery for all to see for the remainder of time. Of course, it's always the show of the tour that goes up right up on YouTube. So I now take it much more seriously when I perform. But I also, at the same time, it's like I approach performance almost from a producer angle. And that's where in-ears really came in handy, because I could really assess the overall sound of the band and my place in it. Without the in-ears, when it's just like a raging rock and roll performance with energy just like spitting out all over the place, flailing. You almost have like a mental picture of like a fire or an explosion or something, and you're just throwing shrapnel out at the audience. But it's so much more powerful when you can really craft a beautifully performed thing with the vocals sounding good and everyone playing. When I say playing in unison, it's not about being a machine. It's just about understanding that when certain things are phrased together, it turns into real beauty because there's that resonance that happens. It's like the right note played at the wrong time is the wrong note, but the right note played at the right time is the absolute right note. And so when everybody is really humming along together in that group mind kind of thing, and everyone's phrasing together, everyone's singing in tune, and you just get that hum, that buzz of everything resonating together, and then that's when you also feel like you're resonating with the forces of the universe, right? That's like, all right, we're doing the right thing here. We're doing what's supposed to be done right at this moment.
For me, that was maybe the most challenging part of being in that band, is like trying to almost kind of like having to get rid of my way of hearing time, which like I think I have a very particular way of doing that when I can play in a small band, because then I can just do that. If I'm the lead guitarist, I can push into a certain direction, right, with the way where I place the notes. But playing in a 10-piece band, that was a completely new experience for me. And even though 25 shows, I think we played 25 shows, was a good chunk, but I would have loved to do more, just to even learn more.
For what was like the most blissful tour that I'd ever done in so many ways, it had such a dark ending. When it's like talking about letting the air out of a balloon. When on the last night of the tour, or the last day of the tour, it became clear that Devin wasn't going to be able to take that band, that full 10-piece band, out on the road in North America, which was the plan. And I just and of course it was just heartbreaking that when we did do the North American tour, it wasn't with you and it wasn't with Samantha and Anne and Arabella. It was still a good band, but man, I sure did miss the whole thing of the 10-piece band. That was such a powerful. It's like I envied the audiences coming to those shows, because it had to be kind of mind-blowing, and also the presentation of those shows. I totally understand why Devin wasn't able to take that tour in North America with all the staging and the visuals and the screens and the props and the blender. Comparison, the North American tour was totally stripped down. We didn't have any sort of staging, like, with the exception of stuffed animals that Devin asked everyone to bring to the shows, and the stuffed animals just piled up higher and higher and higher, and that became the that was the staging. But I'm just tripping on what it was like at the end of the European tour when kind of all had the rug pulled out from under us, and it ended up, I'm sure it was much more trying for you, and I missed you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, for me it was, I played one more show after the Devon tour, which was with Stickman in Nagoya, Japan. We played a show with Gary Husband as a guest.
Right, and you released this, right? That you put that recording.
Yeah, and we called it Owari, which means the end in Japanese, because it was that one show.
That was.
And it was a little
How many shows did you have booked?
I can't remember, but maybe 8 or something. But originally it was also to include China even.
Wow.
Yeah, so and it would have been like 14 or 15 shows, and yeah, so but it really was a little bit like what happened on the last night of the Devon tour, because it was really the day before that we could play the show that we already knew that it wouldn't continue, because they started the lockdown on a Saturday and the show was Friday night, and so it was a sold out show in a jazz club. So I think it was like maybe 350 seats or something, but only 65 people showed up.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, halfway through the North American tour, where we did 2 weeks worth of shows, and then had to not do the rest of the shows and just fly home. I said to Devin, man, I sure do love playing live with you, but these tours really do end weird.
You know, I really knew something was wrong when I got to Narita Airport in Tokyo, right, going back to Germany via Helsinki, I think actually. What happened was that the airport was empty. Narita Airport, like one of the busiest airports, and I can't remember what it was. It was like maybe 7th of March or something. So it was pretty early on in the whole process, and it was empty. And I knew, okay, something's going on. This is going to take a while.
We had a whole, it was clearly the right thing to do, but we had like extensive band meetings on, I guess it was March 12th, which was that was the day that Trump had the address where he said that all the travel between U.S. and Europe was going to be highly regulated or shut down, and it was, in some ways, it was a less trying situation for me and one or two others who lived in the States, because all we had to do was find our way home within the country. We were in the U.S. at the time, so that was, we had it easy. The vast majority of people in the whole organization, band and crew, lived in other countries, and it was a real concern. How does everybody get home? So once we decided that, okay, we are gonna pull the plug on the tour, which this is the same conversation that every other touring band was having that night. Then Paul Collis just got on the phone and started booking flights like crazy. I mean, within like 6 hours of that conversation, where we made the determination that we were not going to tour anymore, I was on a plane headed home. But I know that there were other people in the organization that took them quite a while to get. But we had like a really serious conversation where different people in the organization were like presenting their feelings about it all, and you can get theoretical about it, but when it's a health situation that you just don't understand, it was Nathan Navarro who like stated in the plainest terms, I think it would be wrong to keep playing shows, because at that time it was it was the very beginning of the situation. We had yet to arrive at that, what is now wisdom, hopefully, that we all share, which is that it doesn't make sense to be in a small enclosed space with a whole bunch of other people. So this is under control. So now when I think back on it, you wonder how much super spreading we were responsible for, and also Devin was sick that entire tour, and I felt ill when I got home. It's quite possible we all had it. It's like I didn't get tested for weeks afterward, so I have no idea whether or not I had it at the time. Test for anyways, I was infected. But it's like things changed so radically, so quickly. When we were trying to determine whether or not to do the tour, it was easy to think, oh, this will blow over. Yeah, I mean, it's and you have to like let go of the very sort of the mundane financial aspects of it. But that was like really hard for several people on the crew who were like really counting on this money. So to like go home and not do the rest of the tour was a tremendous blow for them. It was just bad news. So, but again, that was just the very beginning of the whole thing, and we didn't really know what we were contending with all
Yeah.
this.
Yeah, and I remember that you did the GoFundMe pretty early on in the process, right? Like, once you realized that your livelihood was in danger, right? And I did the same. I think we were all maybe like 24 hours between launching our campaigns, and
It felt as though, and then Devin ended up doing it like a few days later, and I kind of felt like a little bit of a trailblazer there, because I saw you post, because I was conflicted about it. It was basically my wife who like made me look at it, because when I got home, I was very still in a state of disbelief, and I'm definitely like optimistic by nature, so I was like just kind of thinking, oh, we'll figure it out, we'll get by, we'll get through this. But I had no plan, and she's like, we need a plan, and it's got to be based around you being able to record at home. She saw that more plainly than I did, and then it's like you look at the savings account, which is none too impressive, and you're like, well, I don't know how I'm going to do that. And she said, well, check out GoFundMe, see what you think of that. And any performing artist, especially one who's been doing it for a long time, I think that there's a natural inclination to want to present this kind of indestructible, got everything under control thing, and you don't ever want to like share with the world, hey, there's like real financial concerns here, and help me, like it's that's a humbling thing. But what was really humbling was how instantaneous the response was. It's like, and Sarah and I spent hours trying to figure out what's the minimum amount of money that I need in order to have a working system, because my laptop was 9 years old. I definitely needed a new computer, and it had to have a certain amount of power in order to be reliable as a Pro Tools engine. And I needed an interface, and I needed speakers, and just we tried to pare it down to the absolute minimum and ask for that much money, and within a day it was doubled, and it was clear that people were actually grateful to be able to help, and that is, I'm like will always profoundly grateful and humbled by that. And every time I sit down here at the rig and prepare to work, it's like it stays with me that this wouldn't exist if it weren't for the fact of people being so kind and supportive. So I'm endlessly grateful.
yes, same for me. And I think the lesson that we were taught by that, somehow I find this interesting in the context of the music business, right? Like, imagine you would have to make like $10,000 by selling an album. Like, how much effort that would take, and money, and how long it would take to make that kind of money. And there you are, and you're just like open, and you say, okay, this is the situation. Can you help me? And it is your fans. It's the same people that would buy your recording, right? And so, like you said, in 24 hours, people will be able to raise that kind of money for you and help you. And I think that's really a sign that something is extremely off, or has always been off, with the music business. That you see, like the support that is available. Like, I mean, why not, ask your fans, okay, like, give me, maybe 10,000 is not enough, but let's just say, give me 10,000 once per year, okay, and I'll be fine. If it would work, like, and I can work, and I'll give you music, and
How I'm viewing Patreon.
yeah.
It is a tremendous platform, but what's also nice about Patreon is that it's content driven. I'm like it's not just me asking for help, which I felt I had no choice but to do, with the GoFundMe, and that I was again very grateful that the response was lovely. But what I've been really enjoying about Patreon is that it's a multi-tiered platform where you can put audio, you can put video, you can put writing, scans of different pictures in the archives. You can have chats like once or twice a month through Crowdcast, which is linked up with Patreon. I have like 2-hour streams where it's just live interacting with Patreon subscribers. I've been going into the multi-tracks of my early solo albums and just like diving into Pro Tools sessions live while people are watching, and just like really investigating all the stuff that's in those tracks, and I've been showing off my record collection. People like are interested to see what records are in my collection. And it's really just it's a platform to share everything about yourself, and the people who are there are only there because they're interested in you, and I think that's like the thing that's really distinct about a platform like Patreon as opposed to posting on Facebook, where you put up your video or your song or whatever on Facebook, and you are doing battle with everything else that's on everybody's feed. It's just a thing that they scroll by, and you're one voice among thousands. Whereas with Patreon, this is a little corner of the internet that's just me, and I'm crafting it exactly. I'm choosing what stuff to post, what stuff to share from the past or the present, and it's great fun, and it is like having a measurable positive impact on my livelihood. It's it's allowing me to pay the rent. So it's given that you can no longer expect to sell an album to anyone, you are forced to figure out other ways, especially when circumstances force you off the road and you can't do gigs, which people like you and I, that's the only way we make money off of music is gigging, and that's the only it's not a sustainable archetype. I'm 59, so in no time at all I'm going to be 69 and then 79. It's like this is why you see artists going out there and being propped up. That B.B. King did tours a good 2-3 years longer than he should have in terms of what his body was built to withstand. But if you haven't figured out some other way to keep your life afloat, you're stuck. You have no choice. So I consider myself very, very fortunate, even with all the trials of the last year and what a strange, and in a lot of ways truly horrible situation that we're in right now. It forced my hand. It forced me to become more self-sufficient. And it forced me to figure out ways to support myself that don't involve live work. Having said that, I can't wait until it is possible to start doing gigs again. But I don't try to delude myself into thinking that it's ever going to go back to the way it was. I think slowly over the course of 10, 11 now. You have to come to the realization that things have changed, and I just have no idea what the world is going to have in store for us post all of this, once we're all hopefully vaccinated and able to interact freely with one another again. But things have changed, but I do know that the feeling of that first gig back is going to be so incredibly powerful. And I haven't. Every once in a while, someone gets in touch asking me if I want to be involved with some socially distant live performance thing, and if anybody, any venue, and venues are really having a horrible time with it right now. Any venue that figures out a way to do that safely, then that's fine. But I'm not ready to go there. I'm still locked down. I'm not in a hurry to try to get back into gigging. Like 1 second sooner than it feels right to me to do so. So I'm not going to mess with my own comfort level and injure my wife's health or anything just to do a gig. But when we get to that point where we can feel truly confident that doing gigs is going to be cool, that's just going to be an insane vibe in that room, man. It's going to be unbelievable, I think.
Like my biggest fear is that what is happening at the moment is sort of like a generational change that we have that is not organic, right? Well, in the way that it used to be, like you had a club and you had somebody running the club and you had a person booking the bands and like things were like, if there was like a new guy, then it would get handed over somehow. Like you still had the same list of people you would contact or be in contact with, and I feel that there's going to be like I'm even concerned about like just like with Tony Levin, for example. Like he's 75 or something, right? And we've been playing together for 11 years now, and and I know that he's in, he's very healthy, but
Yeah.
still, I mean, like it's about like the fact that you're kind of like not able to follow the path that you were on. So in a way, like even at an advanced age, you're forced to sort of like reinvent your life somehow, even if it doesn't involve like having to find another way of income. It's not necessarily just about that, but just the fact of being at home with your wife 24/7, for example, right? And what I'm fearing. Sorry.
The fact that so many couples and families don't have like a harmonious relationship. I'm very fortunate that my wife and I get along, and having seen you with your family, I know that you're all pals. But it is all of a sudden being forced into this enforced closeness every hour of every day is trying for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I just hope that whatever, like even the word post COVID, I don't think there is a post.
No,
In a way, it's just it's always with, it's with COVID.
it's accommodating and somehow or trying to, yeah. Now, Tony and last funny when we all went off the road in March of last year, and the canceled Devon dates, the dates we weren't able to do in North America, were rescheduled for September 2020, and that felt like so far in the future. It's like, well, sure, everything will be fine by then. And now, I'm like, I think it's optimistic to think that we'll be able to do gigs in September of this year, and we had to cancel or postpone the tour that we were going to be doing. The Zappa band, which is basically the band that did the hologram tour, but without holograms. So the Zappa band were supposed to open for King Crimson last summer, which I was very excited about for any number of reasons. And so they rescheduled that for precisely 1 year later, which is June and July of this year. I can't see how that's going to happen. It's just too soon. And like you say, Tony's 75. I'm not sure how old Robert is, but at some point it's not going to be feasible for them to continue postponing a tour.
Yeah.
It's scary. It's very strange.
In around 2016, when we were playing, Stickman was playing St. Louis. We stayed at a hotel there in St. Louis, and next morning when we used the valet parking for the truck, and we had the gear in the truck, and we had packed our pedal boards were under the drum kit, right, and stuff like that, and the truck was returned to us with the door was open, right, it's like the door was, and so we could sit and go. But anyway, like 3 hours later, when we had a pee break, and we got out of the van, and we realized that the truck had been broken into. And so the reason why I'm telling you this is, so I had a like a handmade pedal board, which was worth like maybe $6,000 or something, and Tony's same kind of value was also gone. They didn't take the drums. They only took the guitar stuff.
Remove the drums in order to get to.
Yes. Yeah, but anyway, like what what was so fascinating is that a friend and supporter of mine, back then he set up a GoFundMe just for fans to help me replace the pedal board, and it was kind of like the same thing overnight. That those $6,000 came together. And so the reason why I say this is that I think this model that we're like sort of like this more you could say it's more with more self-confidence, more self-contained, more self-driven, more self-everything, and also more directly communicating with the fans really is the right thing to do, even and especially in this situation right now. And we shouldn't. And you said that Patreon is a good tool for you. And with Patreon, though, I was wondering because I was looking at their pricing, right?
Right.
So how does that work? Does it feel okay, the share they take?
Yeah. Well. The share that Patreon takes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Considering the service that's being offered, I'm fine with it.
Mm-hmm.
But I also have about 180 patrons at this point, so it's a significant enough amount that even after Patreon takes its cut, and there is no Patreon Friday like at Bandcamp, but it still turns into a thing where it's basically covering the majority of my rent every month, and I'm not. There's nothing else like Patreon. I guess OnlyFans or something, but in terms of the same way the same way that Bandcamp has become, and you were like the first person to really sit me down and say you need to take Bandcamp seriously, and I'm working with this producer Scott Shore. We have this group together, MFTJ, that only exists as a Bandcamp recording unit, and I'm sold on Bandcamp, and when I finish my next album, which will be in a few months, that'll be available on Bandcamp. The whole catalog will be available on Bandcamp. I am going to do precisely what you suggested. I see the value in it because Bandcamp has become the place where people who want to support artists will congregate. It's no longer just a service; it's a community, and it's like, so you've got Spotify on one hand and you've got Bandcamp at the opposite extreme, and Bandcamp I think is like real smart about the way they sort of market the service, and I think Bandcamp Friday is really intelligent, and obviously it's a blessing for the artists, and I personally find that Patreon is the same thing. That it's a community, it's a vibe, it's a place on the internet that it's unlike anything else. When you go to how it is when you go to Facebook, Facebook has a feel, Bandcamp has a feel, Patreon has a feel. I like the way Patreon feels. It makes me feel good.
Good.
To create an environment there, to share things. Last night I shared a bunch of drawings that I did about 20 years ago. And it makes me happy to see the response to that, But I wouldn't necessarily do that in any other context. But it's just it's a location where you can kind of just decorate it to your liking, and it's just you. It's your little world that you get to create there. So I like it a lot.
Yeah, I have been one of the early adopters on Bandcamp. 2009, 2010, I think I started using it.
Yeah.
And so just because, right, I'm telling you this, I've been very closely also following the development of that tool, of that website, right, of that service. And recently, so starting last year, some changes were made under the hood, which sort of make me worry a little bit.
Okay.
And it's really things that most people don't see because they don't use it enough, right? But I use it enough. So, for example, only a few weeks ago, I was still able to upload a podcast like the thing that we're doing right here onto Bandcamp and put a link into the about field of the album to a YouTube video that has the same conversation in it. So when that suddenly overnight, and it doesn't say anywhere, it doesn't, you can't read that anywhere. At least I didn't look for it. Let's just put it that way. You can't put links to YouTube into the about text on. So, and it's little details like this that have been sneaking in since last year. So, for example, the big plus of Bandcamp is that it has a sort of like a built-in newsletter. So, because people get automatically signed up to your content when they buy something. Right, they can opt in to get notifications when you put a new album out. So, but then there was one release where I forgot to make. It was only a one-track release, and I was thinking, do I want to make this track available for streaming or not? And I did not make it available for streaming. It turns out, if you don't have one of the tracks on your album streamable, they're not sending out notifications.
I got it. So because it was a one-track thing, in other words, if you just put out one song, which is one of the appealing things about Bandcamp, is that the idea of it is just like an ongoing archive. I've just finished a song, I'm going to put it up on Bandcamp. So, but you're saying you're forced to make it available. It's streaming in its entirety.
Yes.
You can't even just like do the 30-second clip. It has to be the whole song.
You could do that, yeah, but that would be like a second track that you would have to upload, right? You can't have a preview unless you're uploading the excerpt of the track as a second track, right? But anyway, what I found so bad about that is that I didn't know. Nobody was telling me. At the moment where I was pushing like public or publicize or whatever, it says. It could have said, okay, are you sure you don't want to stream? Because if you don't stream it, then people won't get notified. And then obviously I would have made it available for streaming, because it was a loss of a couple €100, which I would have gotten if my people had been notified, right? And it's these little changes to the system which kind of like makes me think that something is they're working on something bigger, and they have just introduced this feature that you can sell live shows, like streaming shows, on Bandcamp. Mm-hmm. And I opted in there also as an early beta tester or whatever it is, and I'm gonna try that soon also to see how that goes.
Did you get involved in the Bandcamp on vinyl program?
Not yet, no.
And I think that's a by invitation only thing.
Yeah, I mean, it is available. I think I opted in for that a while ago, and it is an option, but I've never done a vinyl production via their service.
I'm very intrigued by that because I've never released one of my albums on vinyl, and it's always been a financial choice, because there's my following is loyal, but they're not legion. There's not a whole bunch of them, and vinyl is expensive to produce. So I'm intrigued by the Bandcamp on vinyl program. If I do get involved with Bandcamp, which I still intend to do, even with the caveats.
It's still the best thing out there. I'm not saying it's a real blessing, but I'm just saying there's some things, and like for example, the Bandcamp Fridays are great. Yes, mm-hmm. They are great, but at the same time, like the attention economy, right? Like everything is kind of like it's focused on that one day of the month, and right. then people who are friends like you and I, we were both in Bandcamp. And we would be both releasing stuff on that Bandcamp Friday, and like maybe the fans that are fans of both of our music, they would have to decide, right? And we sort of get into some sort of competition just because that window is artificially being created, and yeah.
I don't know if there's any way around that, because I don't see them adding more days. I don't make sense for
no. No, and I'm not complaining. I think it's just important that we keep observing what's going on, just to make sure we're sort of like maybe a little bit ahead of the curve, just to make sure we're not falling off the table backwards, like
Yeah,
if that makes any sense.
it does, and it's a challenge, especially for someone who's not oriented. I'm still like really kind of dazed by technology. It's required in order to do what we do, but it's not my comfort zone. And it, when I set up this rig, and the learning curve of just becoming, learning how to use the interface properly and running Pro Tools by myself, and then getting the Patreon account off the ground, it took me several months. It's just to really wrap my head around what was required to do Patreon properly. I still do it in a kind of eccentric way compared to the way I see other people doing it. One of the things that I do on Patreon that I'm really happy about, because it's built in, the tiered system is built into Patreon, where different you offer different degrees of access, or at least this is ostensibly the way it works. You offer different degrees of access depending on how much people, the size of someone's patronage, but Sarah was doing research on different artists doing Patreon, and she found that several artists made all the same content available at all the different tiers. So, like for instance, on which I've adopted. So I have a $5 a month level, $10 a month, 25, 50, and then there's a much higher level, which is different because that also involves a one-on-one streaming session of some kind once a month. So it's really kind of 4 basic tiers of all different dollar amounts, but everybody who subscribes at that level gets access to all the same stuff. It's like, I'm not going to deny you access to this song I want to post just because you can only afford to give me $5 a month. I think it's miraculous that somebody wants to give me $5 a month. That's $60 a year. That's a lot of money. So, as far as I'm concerned, the person who joins at that level deserves the same access as the person who joins, who can afford and wants to give that degree of support to join at $50 a month. And I don't think that the people who join at the $50 level feel ripped off that there are people at the $5 level who are gaining access to the same stuff, because similar to the GoFundMe, I don't think very few of the people who are subscribed to my Patreon are there just because they want to get stuff. They're there because they want to support me. That's the nature of the relationship at this point, and I'm so grateful for that. And it's the kind of thing that, like, just while the standard conventional music industry channels continue to just like go down the tubes in terms of what it has to offer an artist, who are responsible for the industry because they provide the content that makes the industry go, and yet somehow they're always last in line when the money's being handed out. You have no choice really nowadays but to find new ways to get out there. It's no thing. It's not the 70s anymore. You don't just put out a record and make a bunch of money.
That's why I mentioned the paddleboard incident, right? And that's why we were talking about the GoFundMes we did and about Patreon. And I have a Bandcamp VIP, which is sort of like a subscription thing. So like people sign up and they get everything. And it's sort of like the same thing there. I have 2 tiers, but basically the second tier is just like, oh, you pay more, but you get the same thing. And it's just this way for people to show their appreciation really, and their willingness to support, and that really is. It's interesting if we say that it is sort of like the new paradigm, right? Like in a way, but it's sort of the old paradigm, like the patronage.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And there's something kind of lovely and pure about it. It seems to take some of the grimier aspects of commerce out of it, and it turns into more of a human interaction. And it's kind of lovely.
Yeah, it's more musical. Like there is no middleman. It's less of there's no gatekeeper really,
Right.
and I love that.
Yeah. It's like in-ears as opposed to wedges.
Yeah, exactly. Um, so what's do you have dreams for your future? Like let's not think or talk about COVID for a moment, and let's just freely associate and get ideas for the future. What do you wish for yourself? Let's say to start with.
I mean, when you said dream, I instantly got a very specific vision in my head, which is, I guess you could kind of look at it as what would be my version of what our tour with Devin was. You know, that larger band with some really nice staging and just an overall kind of conceptual thrust to it. And you know, I've got however many albums I've done at this point, over 30. Uh, a large body of music, and I have my band, Beer for Dolphins, who are beautiful, wonderful people who have done so much for me, so much support. Um, but there's never like the money for extended amounts of rehearsal to like do more involved live performance. The amount of time and preparation required to do a more large scale tour has, to this moment in my life, not not been there. So my dream, I guess, would be to like find a way to sustain this feeling of self support, which is not self-support. It's reliant upon the support of the people who enjoy the music and enjoy the you know, just sort of like the overall project that I've been piecing together for decades now. Um, so I don't have any plans in mind, but I that's my dream is to put together a wonderful tour that maybe, you know, plays some nice theaters where it sounds really good, but not too big, where there's no chance of filling it. You know, just like I'd like to be able to, you know, pump up my career status to the point where, you know, I could play a nice small theater and rely on the fact that, yeah, enough people will come so that it won't be a disaster. Um, and just like present my music in a way that's not as, you know, just sort of like guerrilla. You know, there's just like the hard hit at the on the nightclub level, but, you know, just like a slightly more elevated presentation. And beyond that, I'm just going to keep making albums. You know, I haven't put out an album since 2016, so right now I have a lot of album energy. I'm like jazzed and worked up to get my album finished, and I don't mind. I'm doing so many other people's projects, which again is the best problem to have. Uh, but I'm just like eager. So right now I'm doing this project for a composer named Bear McCreary, and it's got me very occupied, and I should have my stuff done on it by the end of this month. So starting next month, I'm moving my new album up to the top of the stack, and I'm going to work very hard to complete that, and I think it's going to be. I mean, I'm still like just seeing the pieces come together right now, and seeing where it's heading, and I think it's going to be something. Certainly, people who are already into what I'm doing are going to enjoy the album, and I don't have any particular fantasies about reaching a huge audience with it, but I'm just gonna keep doing my thing. But to answer your question, the fantasy of is that really nice, sort of elegantly produced live performance with a larger band, because there's so many songs I can't do. On my very first album, Hat, there's this 14-minute piece called Lightnin' Roy, which is a completely absurd piece of music, and I would need 5 guitar players to do it the way it is on the record. And I have like this little fantasy that at some point I will put together an ensemble that is able to present this music the way it was created. Um, we'll see. What about you? What's your fantasy?
That's a good question. It's a very good question. I started playing with a couple guys in 2019. Fabio Trentini on bass and myself, Circus on drums, and we did a trio album called Truce, which is sort of like a solo album of mine. Which
What I've heard of it is just beautiful. I mean, I need to experience the whole album, but that's a real achievement. It's a great album.
yeah, and that feels like I would really, because that album was such a surprise to all of us. Just and also like it was my first guitar album, the first album where I appear as a soloist, like in a on a grander scale, let's say, right? And so it was something that Leonardo Pavkovic almost had to force me to do. And so I'm really curious. I would like to continue playing with those guys and to see where that goes, because I have to say that what really still drives me the most is like asking myself the question, what if? Like, what if I do this? What if you know, I not, like I said, like, what if we do 150 shows and not 25? Like, how tight will the band get, right? That's kind of what's driving me.
Yeah, the what can be done, what is possible.
Yes,
That's
and
sort of the ongoing thing. That's why I can't imagine ever getting tired of music, because I think that what if will always exist.
yeah, is the project with Todd Rundgren still?
It is. That's like firmly in my court at this point, because I have to complete my composition for it, and it's kind of funny. This is similar to what you were saying about, you'd think all this time to create, you would just automatically be creative. Uh, with me, it's like, yeah, I'm here. I'm locked down at home. I should be able to apportion my time and say, okay, this much of each day I will devote to continuing to work on my compositional side of the Rundgren project. It just doesn't happen, because creating is not just time; it's also energy. So if I'm pouring all of my energy into any number of other projects, I can't just say, okay, so it's 6:30, time to write for Todd.
Mm,
I really need to like clear enough other stuff off of my plate to make room to put myself there. So because what it is, it's 17 tunes that I basically have to write, and then give that music to Todd, and then Todd will take it from there. He'll elaborate and write lyrics and manipulate and whatnot. Um, and also, now that I was, prior to the pandemic, I had written, I think, 9 of the pieces, and I didn't have a recording rig at home, so I was just coming up with these like kind of not very inspiring sounding MIDI tracks that my Muse score notation program was putting out. Now that I'm able to record at home and I have access to some sound libraries and stuff, I want to revisit everything that I've already written and basically record my versions of what I've written heretofore. And then I have to continue and do the second half of the composition that's required. So it's a lot of work, and there's no money up front. It's not the project where I'm being funded. So it's that's the reality of why I haven't been able to finish my solo album, which I thought was going to come out last year. It's because I have to work to support myself, and I have to take paying jobs, and so the Todd thing eventually will result in some kind of income once it's actually staged. But at this point in the collaboration, it's sort of like it's pro bono. So,
it's an investment. Like anything you do for it is an investment.
yeah, and of course I want to have this project. I'm a huge Todd Rundgren fan. His music was enormous to me when I was growing up, and he's like still like a couple of years ago I saw him in New York, and I couldn't believe how well he was singing. It's like better than ever before. I saw him afterwards and I said, it doesn't make sense how good you're singing. And he goes, I know, it doesn't make sense to me either. So he's in a really good spot as a performer right now, and I'm very excited to be doing this collaboration with him. And I feel a little bit abashed that it's taking me so long to finish my end of the thing, but it's just a reality. If you're not being funded, it's hard to carve out the time to do the work. But the way I see it right now, I mean, I have a list of projects. There's several bands that I'm involved in that I want to move our music forward, and then I've got my album to do. I feel like once I make that progress, I'll be able to, like, probably around April, I'll be able to like reinvest my energy and time into the Todd project.
Good. So was it an interesting conversation where not even once did we utter the words Frank Zappa?
I think I might have mentioned it.
Or maybe.
Maybe I just said Zappa and not Frank. But yeah, that's I don't mind a little variety in life. I've done a couple of interviews that were like extremely Zappa focused. So yeah, cheers.
Yeah, cheers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Mike, I wish you all the best, and let's see what this year will bring. And yeah, I'm in the process of reinventing myself, not knowing what that means really, and not knowing where that's going, and just kind of like because you asked me about my dreams as well, and I wouldn't say that I have a dream really, but it turns out that I'm much more of a people person than I ever felt, right? Like
Okay.
like I was always very happy to be alone, and just and it turns out that I've become such an important person for many people, connecting so many people, and I know many couples that know each that came that met because of me, and like all these things is crazy for me because I never really wanted any of that. But I want to just try to embrace a little bit of that and be open to just be more social, let's say. And it's funny because it's this time of social distancing where I'm realizing that it's actually important for me to communicate.
I mean, being on the road with you and in that environment with that large band, because I always had, I hadn't met you, and I kind of it's easy to form impressions of people that you haven't met, and I always thought of you as a very serious artist. And so to get on the bus with that band and to see you just joyous, just like really enjoying the social aspect of being with these wonderful people, because it's a beautiful band. Everybody in the band is a wonderful person. That's my other fantasy, is that somehow Devin lands budget so that we can bring that band on the road again. That would be fun. But, I that was a real pleasure for me. It was a wonderful pleasure to meet you and have some of my preconceptions about the sort of person and artist you were subverted, because it was a very social experience, and you're right, especially now when being able to freely interact is such a challenge. It's very important. Connection to other people is very, very important.
And I see you have a drawing of me on the wall there behind you.
That's Scambot, and yeah, I guess he is actually. I didn't realize just how much he was based on you, but one little thing you just snuck into my process without me even realizing it.
Okay, thank you, Mike. But one last thing, you mentioned that you're working for Bear McCreary, right? And because I asked some of my friends and fans a couple days ago which people I should have on the podcast, and somebody mentioned Bear. So maybe you could give me his email and I can write to him.
I'll put in a word. I know he's very busy.
Yeah.
What I can do.
Okay, thank you very much, Mike.
Thank you, my friend.
Yeah, see you soon. Bye.
See you.